Welcome back to Lean by Doing. I recommend sticking around because you're going to see me get grilled by how bad we do safety in our business. This week's guest is Chad Bareither. He is an author and lean expert who's local to Kalamazoo. So he was kind enough to join me in the studio today. So let's get into it. So welcome to the show. Today I have with me a guest who lives in town, actually. It's kind of funny. We found that he lives a handful of miles away, and he was like, hey, can I come visit? This is Chad Bareither. And he wrote this book right here, Improve Less. I heard this on a few different podcasts, and some of the things I put into play before I even knew that Chad was local. So Chad, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Oh, appreciate the invite.
And earlier we walked the factory. I gave you the tour. I gave you everything. Before I go any further, besides the fact that you're an author, we just had recently talked about this as you're a consultant. And then I said, hey, do you hate the term consultant?
Yeah, I mean, I don't love it because I think people have preconceived notions of what that means, right? Mm-hmm. And you have folks that are going to walk in suit and tie and tell executives how to run the business different and then give you a bill and fly back out, right? But I love what I do, being on the shop floor, kind of locking elbows with the staff. And so, yeah, I'm a consultant, but I kind of look at our work as like high-touch engagements, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you the advice, but we're going to make it work together.
Yeah. And one of the things that you're really known for is strategy deployment. Like basically you took Hoshin Connery and like dumbed it down maybe for us Westerners to understand. the Hoshin Connery thing is crazy. Like if you ever looked at this thing, the way that they map it, I mean, it's pretty intense and it's overwhelming. And yours is so much simpler because it's just, 3 categories essentially.
Yeah. I mean, instead of dumb it down, maybe I'll say simplify. I kind of look at that as my superpower. Like one of my strengths is learning. So I love learning new things. And then how do you simplify that so you can teach it to others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So I gave you the tour. I took a nickel from you. It's crazy that the prices haven't gone up on that tour yet.
Yeah.
But hey, maybe the next time around it'll cost a little more. However, as I always do, I want to ask, what were the things that you saw? What stood out to you? And then obviously, where can we improve?
Okay. Yeah. Well, just kind of starting, it's important to set the current state with you're 7 to 8 months into this journey, which is amazing because clients I work with and see some of the progress that you've made is like they've gotten there after years of deployment and kind of stagnated. Mm-hmm. So first of all, just the amount of investment in time and energy you put into it is amazing. And we talked in your office before we went on the floor. And I think one of the most important things is the mindset that you're coming into it with and the rest of your leadership team of really embracing this and thinking about what you want to accomplish, if you want to say that, what we want to accomplish with Lean before implementing it. So, I mean, those are definitely some tailwinds that you already have going in. Like we've got momentum, we've got leadership with the right mindset. It's something that I'm doing, I need my staff to do while I go do this other stuff in the business. A couple of specific things I loved. Yeah. The backwards PO.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Love that.
Let me give a little context to this. Obviously, with an ERP system, you have to build a purchase order and you have to do a PO receipt. We have switched to where our value streams are ordering the product from the shop floor. So the cards get turned in, they pull it off, they scan the back, it sends an email off to our vendor. Hey, I need this and this many. It's all automated. So they don't have to change anything. They just hit send. And then when we receive the product, they send us a packing slip. The packing slip goes in the board. We receive the inventory into the building. Now we need to reconcile in the ERP. Otherwise, your perpetual inventory gets screwed up. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is now our purchasing department or accounting department are taking the pack slip, building the PO in Epicor, then receiving it and done. So now no one on my shop floor is taking the time to actually create a purchase order and then also do a purchase order receipt, which takes a lot of time.
It does. And I've worked with clients as well where if you have a receiving error, because you have to do a 3-way match.
Yep.
Now, if there's an error on the packing slip or the purchase order, I'm stuck, right? Yeah. And I just think not only is it more efficient for the value creators, but it prevents a lot of errors from happening. So loved that. And love your use of kitting and travelers in different areas. Mm-hmm. So there's the bolt packs, obviously, but where you've gone with your custom-made bins and your 2-bin Kanban, which are driving work upstream in the process. And you shared with me some of your vision of where that's going in the future. Yeah. So only upward. So very cool.
When customers work, or I guess your customers, when people are working in Lean and they have to use an ERP system, you want to cut out all the triggers from the ERP system. So you don't want like a job for a bumper and then a job for a tube and a job for a bolt pack. You want to build triggers into your system so you release one job, and that job is pulling what it needs along the way. And then that way, it requires you to build a bunch of supermarkets, right? So you're building supermarkets here and there. So you have 2 bins, this and that. But it's so much more effective because now your data that you're wasting time with is only creating one job, not 4 jobs that now you have to manage and audit and make sure everything's done correctly.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks that are saying, I can't divorce myself from the MRP, have a false sense of productivity of like, that's going to keep my inventory lower at a minimum. But you batch a bunch of work in process. You might not be producing the right thing at the right time. I pointed out a couple of material flow issues, even in your own site, where that happens, where you have kind of first in, last out type queuing systems.
Right. Yeah, we definitely mix up our FIFO more than I would care to do. So that means like the first in and first out, the way it comes in, it gets, well, you called it laundry, right?
Yeah.
The laundry that goes in the basket first gets done last.
Yeah.
And some of the ways that we're staging our work, we're essentially making that same laundry mistake where the thing that arrived first is now the last thing to get processed. That's a problem. We have some ideas on how to fix it. I still think it's going to rear its ugly head at times, especially when you start to get outside of your normal flow, which is kind of what you're noticing here. We had some downtime with lasers, so we cranked it up. So now we're kind of pushing burden across the building to try to get caught up. Not a great way. If you would have came in here about 5 weeks ago, you'd be like, this is really balanced. This is really working. We still mixed our FIFO up there then, so just so you're aware.
But I think it's hugely mature of you as an organization only this far in your lean journey to recognize that and be like, yeah, we could do better there. But I do want to point out that was probably not my biggest observation for improvement while we were walking through the plant.
So give it to me.
So we were in your office, if you remember, before we went out on the floor, and I'm just like, hey, I brought my steel toes. Do I need steel toes, earplugs, safety glasses? And you're like, no, we don't need anything.
Yeah.
And we push the door open to go on the floor, and what's on the door?
It says, safety glasses required beyond this point.
Safety glasses required beyond this point. So I've just always struggled with any standard that we put in place and we don't follow. I don't know who said it first. The standard that you walk by is the standard you accept. So we're creating this situation or this environment where, well, what is the safety standard? And it makes it ambiguous. And the whole point of lean is to make it very clear what we're trying to do. So that, and there were some trip hazards even when we went through that door, like shoes at the lockers and things like that.
And I'm sure you saw one of our staff riding a dolly through the building.
I did. So I chuckled for 2 reasons. One, because I saw them kind of like skateboarding, kick pushing on the pallet jack. Yeah. But I did that one of my first summer jobs, right? Is my brother and I were shipping clerks, and I can remember racing pallet jacks through. Yeah. I wouldn't recommend that anymore. Not a safe practice. But there's just things I observed of walkways being obscured, using equipment improperly. We were doing some grinding. I know they weren't welding, but they didn't have the curtain pulled back. Yeah. Safety glass. And it's just, I'm looking through and say, I coach when we look at daily management, right? We have safety, quality, delivery, and cost in that priority of order. Like if we can't get safety right, I don't really care that you're delivering product on time. Everyone should go home with all their capabilities, same number of fingers and toes as they came in with.
Yeah, I think that it's tough to hear. It's tough to hear, but that's something that we've always lacked as a company. Fortunately, we've avoided any sort of like real injury issues. That doesn't mean that we're not immune from it, and it doesn't mean they couldn't happen tomorrow. I really struggle with this because it's not something that's like everybody's priority, and that is probably partially because of my leadership. I don't love safety. It's not like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh man, I just love safety. So it's really hard for them to find the passion or find somebody here that's like, I'm going to champion this. But you're absolutely right. When you talk about lean, it's always safety first, right? It's respect for people. And if we're doing a bad job with safety, then we need to fix this. It's funny timing that you brought this up because in some of our like lean chat groups, that has been a big topic where people have been talking about like making standards for what the standard looks like in our building. And some guys have been actually making Gemba docs and videos showing like, hey, this is where our eye wash stations are. And this is where you document anything, scrapes, whatever. So it's funny timing. I knew it was a matter of time before somebody asked. I push that door open every single day, and I think the same thing, like why don't I just take the sticker off the door? But how do I make my guys care when they don't want to do it, when they don't want to wear safety glasses, or when they don't want to, I guess it's an awareness thing, maybe an awareness thing.
I think awareness is part of it, but if we'll kind of narrow back in, but if you broaden out in general, and we want to have standards around safety.
Yeah.
Like, let's say I went through that door and I do need to have safety glasses when I'm on the floor. Do they understand the why? So if we talked a little bit before we started recording, the broader why of why lean, like why lean by doing, of like why lean at all. You said you just went through a process of kind of reestablishing vision, mission, values. Like, do they understand what all of this work on standard work and Kanban is supposed to help do for them and for the company? And the same thing with, as you talk about safety, is like, why would we focus on safety right now? Do they understand the why behind what you're doing? In my approach, we always start with why. Do we have alignment towards a vision and mission, what we're trying to create with this company, what we're trying to create for our customers? So they might not see a connection between, you want me to wear my safety glasses so we can deliver parts for Jeep owners?
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, but that's your job as the leader to make that connection.
Yeah.
And we don't want to wait till it's, especially in safety. Like, if you miss a delivery, that's one thing you can usually recover from.
Yeah.
If you have a safety incident, you're not that big of an organization. Like, that's going to be felt throughout your staff.
Yeah.
And we don't want that to happen, because then it does also impact quality, delivery, and cost.
Well, do you want to hear something crazy? And it's probably going to make you cringe. So with Gemba Docs, we are one of the top companies that have like the most SOPs and the most Kanban. And would you like to know how many safety SOPs we have?
Tell me.
0. We actually have 0 safety SOPs in Gemba Docs. So we haven't created a single standard for safety. Maybe if we went in there, we might find somebody that did something that we could say, yeah, that's a slice of it. Maybe there's a slice of safety built into that standard work. But no, it's definitely a challenge to us that we need to improve. Another thing I think, and it feels like an excuse, but we're in the process of building a new facility. We're going to move. And so we make some excuses for, well, we're not going to worry about it here. We're not going to do that. We're not going to worry about putting tape down for the aisles because we're going to be leaving in 4 months. But it's not a good excuse, especially when it comes to the safety of people and the respect for people. They should be the number one priority.
We could tie it to an analogy, something we saw on the floor. So we saw that we have the Kamishibai boards.
Yeah, Kamishibai boards. Yeah. There you
go. On the finishing area. And you said we had to keep, it kept clogging up, so we need to change the water. So we've added daily and weekly preventive maintenance to that, right? So those are precursors, they're predecessors to, we don't want to wait for the machine to be down to schedule maintenance. We're going to do all these things to prevent machine down. Safety can be looked at a lot in the same way of like, we haven't had any safety incidents.
Yeah.
Well, that's lucky. Good, but we walked through the plant and I saw 3, 4, I don't know, a handful of what I would call either near miss or high risk practices, right? And so those, there just shouldn't be tolerance for that within there, because, and it's not to say like, I don't have tolerance for that. It's like, it's protecting you as the worker. Like, we want you to keep working here and to thrive. And you've mentioned that. Your leadership style, like, we want you to grow. We want you to grow with the company. Well, if you get hurt, you get injured, you take time off work, like, that doesn't happen. So it's not really putting standards in place to be overbearing. And we talked a little bit about this before recording as well. Like, a standard solves a problem. Now, do we have a problem with safety yet? No, but I'd argue that's a category you don't want to wait to have a problem in before you set a standard.
Yeah. So I'm going to break the fourth wall, and I'm going to address my team directly. Guys, this is a challenge to us. We've done a kick-ass job at implementing lean, but we have definitely not put safety first, and I think that's something that we all should try to champion. So for those of you that are listening, don't be surprised when I start ratcheting up on this, because Chad is right. We definitely need to protect ourselves and have the ultimate respect for each other. So anyways, back to the show. So that is a great piece of feedback, and I really appreciate that. And I know that you gave me a little bit of a warning ahead of time that was going to come up, and I was like, give it to me. It's a little embarrassing to, it's like being caught with your pants down in a way, like, look at us, we're so good, but there's always room to be better. So finding a challenge and accepting a challenge, and those are important too.
Yeah.
That's the benefit of having people come from the outside and look at our business, because we look at it every single day. We kick that door open with the safety glasses on it every single day. And, maybe half the team wants to opt into that. Well, we'll do better. We'll definitely do better. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so let's move on. I want to talk about something that the first time that I heard about you or from you was during a podcast. And I couldn't remember which one it was. It was either Lean Solutions or the Gemba Academy one. And one of the things at the time, I was in the process of breaking up my weld cell into 3 working teams. And I guess one team, 3 people. Instead of being a silo, they were processing the work through. And we had done this great Kaizen event where we tore everything out and we set up this whole operation and we said, hey, we figured it out. The people are the changeover, not the tooling. So let's change our people over for the job, and that'll be our single-minute exchange of die. And so we implemented it, we put it into place, we made it look awesome, we standardized the tools, and then we walked away, and then 2 weeks later we said, how come they don't have this figured out? And then I listened to you, and you were talking about improving less, right? Companies have a really bad job, or do a really bad job, of taking projects 90% of the way and then moving on. And as somebody who's been rushing through Lean to implement, I am guilty of this 100%, where what is the next thing I want to work on? What's my next target? How do I get there? And how do I get there as fast as possible? And that point was probably it might have been about 2.5 months ago. And I said, we got to slow down. We have to make sure that these Kaizen events stick. We need to show them how to do the work, why we're doing it this way, not just here's your new process, enjoy. And I thought that was crazy. So I bought your book, got into your book, and I was expecting to find a lot more of that. And I actually found a lot of strategic stuff from like the leadership side. So when I got into your book and I started to really realize that like, if you're leading the company, you can't be in the daily work. I mean, that's it, right? That's it. That's your baseline. You're telling these leaders, stop trying to build the product, start leading the strategy. Do you mind like kind of expanding on like the importance of leadership, letting go of those things, and how do you go about getting people to buy into that?
Yeah, I think the second part of that question is going to be harder to answer, but we'll kind of use the weld cell as an example. And first of all, before I get into that, I mean, what a great observation of like the people are my machines, not the equipment. Because it ties back to the fact that a lot of what we cover in Lean, it's principle based. Like if we get so rigid and dogmatic about like the machine changeover, we're talking about the machine, to observe and say, no, what we're really talking about is like changing between jobs, I think was a great observation. But if we zoom back out and say like, how do you get people to focus on, as a leader, I need to be executing at a certain hierarchy in the business. I'm sorry, I don't mean hierarchy in terms of like priority. At a certain elevation where I'm thinking strategic, up and out.
Yep.
Because if you're not, who is? And hopefully I don't let too much out here, but different markets that you serve, we've talked about, have ebbed and flowed.
Yeah.
And so if someone isn't watching that and we're just focusing on like plowing ahead and getting today's orders out, like, well, who is watching the horizon? Who is considering what other markets we're going to expand to? Who is innovating on products and solutions? So someone needs to have the eyes on the business of what we're going to deliver tomorrow. And I just physically can't, without burning out, like do that and make sure every order gets out today.
Yeah, I heard the best way I guess the best thing I heard about this was that we have basically 2 businesses that we're running. We're running the business to satisfy customers today, and we're running a business for the customers we're going to serve tomorrow. And the idea is that like your customers that are today are probably not going to be the customers that are tomorrow, and the product that you're making today will not be the product that you make in the future. And I'm 44. I started this when I was 20 years old. And at some point, you're going to see a switch, and you start to become the boomer who's like, I don't want to use an iPhone. I'm not using AI. You know what I mean? I'm really at that point where in my life where I feel like, shit, I could be this boomer if I'm not careful. But yeah, like trying to balance, like knowing when to focus on today and when to focus on tomorrow.
So started when you're 20, you were actually doing the hands-on fabrication, right? That was the value-added work. If you step back now with 4 brands being assembled underneath you, like the value that you're bringing is learning and studying and networking. Like it doesn't feel like the same amount of value, but a lot of leaders struggle with that because as I come up in the organization, I got promoted because I was good at what I did. That's still what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Right? I don't sense that with your particular approach to leadership. But if we kind of generalize, and you said, how do you get leaders? Second part of that question, how do you get leaders to adopt that? Is by showing them where they're spending their time. So I don't think anyone who's watching, listening would disagree that as a leader, I need to be thinking up and out. Like, who's planning for 3 to 5 years from now of what we need? I can't decide to invest in AI 10 years from now. You will probably have missed that bus.
Yeah.
This is an AI podcast, though.
Yeah, so, let's not make it one. It is produced by AI. I am not real.
But I need to be thinking about that. And I don't think leaders would disagree. But if you look at just audit your calendar, it's an exercise I do with leaders early on in engagement. Like, where are you spending your time? If I'm spending time on the daily task, I'm spending time on the Kaizen events. Now, do I need to teach that? Sure. But if I can't walk away from that weld cell and be confident that it's going to sustain, like, well, then strategically I need to be developing the leader who is going to do that. You mentioned this early on about kind of that multiplier effect, right?
Yeah.
So 30, 40 people in your organization.
Yeah.
You can move a lot faster with 30 to 40 improvements per week than you can with one improvement per week.
Yeah.
And you have that going on a small scale. The question is, when you make these more substantial process improvements, how do you sustain it? Well, as the leader, you need to be building someone to do that for you, not you doing it.
Yeah. With that weld cell project, I actually turned it over to my value stream manager for the welding department. At the time, we weren't doing value streams yet. So I actually went to my production manager, who's been back there forever. He's been with me for like 12 years. And I was like, Casey, you need to fix this. And he was like, on it. And then he had to figure out how to handle it. And what we found was it actually needed a water spider. It couldn't manage itself. They were still wasting a lot of time trying to figure stuff out. So we needed to set the work up for them. They did a pretty good job without the help, but once we gave them the help, it got better. That's a really interesting one. Another thing that came up when we were talking about leadership, you said that, like, I got promoted because I'm a hard worker. Therefore, my identity is I'm a hard worker. And that's something that I have directly with one of my guys. And I'll say his name out loud. It's Brian Schrader. I have him on a podcast soon. Brian Schrader was a farmer. His entire life, he's been a farmer. And you know what farmers do?
They work hard.
They just work hard.
Yeah.
And so as we have shifted, Brian's role has changed. We did a shipping Kaizen event where we actually eliminated Brian's entire job. So he went from like managing this department, managing the daily work, babysitting the work, to I have nothing to do. And it's hard for Brian because he identifies with being hardworking, being willing to do anything, and, you know, like being helpful. So now we've kind of put him in this weird island where he has to like identify his new role. And that's difficult because I try to tell him all the time, like, I don't need you to work so damn hard. I need you to work smart. But that's hard because it takes coaching and mentoring to teach somebody the next stage.
Yeah.
Where, like, naturally I always just knew what the next stage was. Like, I'm going to take this process, figure out how to make it a process, and hand it off to the next person. I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you grow, right?
Yeah. But if Brian or whoever needs to take that next, so that's where you're spending your time, right? It's like, as a leader, strategically developing the other leaders so you can multiply your effect, which is different than saying, I need to be the one to sustain that Kaizen event because it didn't work, right? And we can easily get stuck back into that of making it work. Another thing while we're on that topic, because you mentioned we found out we needed a water spider, there was 2 or 3 times on the tour. One was with the board that has your customer orders where you do your daily meetings.
Yep.
And you kind of just played it off like casually, but I wrote it down. It was like, well, we're just going to experiment with it and see what happens. And I'm like, that's beautiful to see that, like, that's an embraced mindset at the leadership level. Yeah. And then hopefully your people are taking that. So Brian is taking that as well. Your production manager for the cell is like, we did make an improvement, but we get to like what Mike Rother refers to in Toyota Kata as like the threshold of knowledge. Like, once we change it, we're not 100% sure how well it's going to work. Yeah. And we need to embrace the fact that we're going to have to iterate on the backside of any change.
This came up recently. I made a video about it. We use these binders to make our bull packs. We've had them forever. They're printed, you know, basically standard work inside of a binder. And the person will grab the binder, find the bull pack, shovel through, and then they'll make the bull pack. We put it all into Gemba Docs, but we haven't been using Gemba Docs for it, even though it's all there. So finally, we get the tablet out there, and we're ready to move forward. And Brian's daughter, Kirsten, she does her bull packs. She made a great improvement video, and she's like, here's our new process. We could throw these clunky binders in the trash, dumps them into the trash can. So I'm over there working on a project, helping them try to, Well, I was telling you about like condensing the bolt packs.
Yeah.
So I was out there physically like putting the bed dividers in and lids on and trying to consolidate it so we're ready. And somebody comes over to make a bolt pack. They open the bottom drawer and there are the 2 binders. And I was like, who got these out? Who picked these out of the trash? So actually, I took the binders and I was like, you know what? If I throw them away in the trash again, someone else is just going to dig them back out of the trash, obviously, right? So I took them outside, went out into the parking lot. I grabbed brake cleaner and a torch, and I lit them on fire in the middle of the parking lot. And in our break room, there is a sign now that Morgan made, and it says the path is forward, and it's a charred binder clip from the binder, and it burned for 3 hours in our parking lot. These binders just burnt.
Oh, man.
And for me, it's like, if we're making an improvement, we're going to improve on the improvement. I don't want to go backwards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're gonna make it work. My wife gets so mad at me about this because she's like, how do you know this is going to work? And I'm like, because I'm going to put every effort into making sure it's the right decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mindset, right? Like, you can go backwards, or you could find a way to make improvements on the improvement and make it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's an interesting story.
Well, and there's something we were talking about before. It came up on this subject of safety, but it was how do you hold someone to a standard when they actually don't want to participate in it? Mm-hmm. And I think this is a great example that you're talking about, this kind of burn the ships mentality, right? Of like, we're not going back. Is like, how do you give that individual, like, rather than the answer of like, this is the change and this is what we're doing, how do you let them take some of the ownership and the accountability over the improvement of like, I'm not even going to tell you the solution, not even going to tell you what's going to change. This is the result I want to see. And if they have more buy-in and autonomy in whatever the change is, writing the safety standard or changing the flow of materials or introducing the preventive maintenance or whatever it is, like they're going to have that same mentality about torching binders in the parking lot that you are of like, we're not going backwards.
Yeah. That's really hard. That's a big culture shift to get to where you have the level of people that are willing to like fully take on. We have people that'll make standard work and they'll work on standard work. And now we're getting to the point where we need to improve the standard work that we made. But we made it a priority. We said, guys, you're doing the standard work different than the standard work. It's up on your screen. Why is this different? I'm like, well, we made an improvement. Well, change the standard work. Yeah. And so now they're starting to see, oh yeah, duh. Now we'll change the standard work. But trying to get them to buy in when they don't want to be part of it is really tough. It's that why. Some people are going to be so stubborn that they think it's the dumbest thing ever and they don't want to be part of it. That's just the bottom line. That becomes the Tom Hughes, change the people or change the people mentality, or the Paul Akers 2-second lean mentality of get them out of your way. They're just an obstacle. That's hard because they're all people.
It is, right? And so you mentioned a couple. I was going to look at Jim Collins and Good to Great, right?
Yeah.
I get the right people on the bus.
Yeah.
And we're talking about people here, so I'm not trying to be insensitive, right?
Yeah.
But organization your size, and there was a couple folks when we were having different discussion about different changes coming up. You're like, they're going to hate it. They're very change resistant. And if I'm adding up, doing quick math in my head, it's about 10%.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon for a lot of organizations, that you're going to have a lot of folks that are resistant. So your options are, right, to invest in that person and give them a charter, North Star, a compass bearing to help like realize they have to change to get there. I'm blanking on who I heard say this, but they were talking about in Kaizen events, like what do you set as a target? And there's like, you have to set something that's unreasonable, because if it's like an incremental improvement, not a substantial improvement, we're just going to tweak the way we do business, not think about it totally different. So how do you get some of those people and say, look at the way they do their job and say, let's take one of the areas, and I won't call out the area, and say like, we'd like to do it with one person.
Yeah.
What would that take?
This is actually a very up-to-date topic that we're having. I have a Lean All-Stars team, and they're a group of guys that are like exceptional in Lean. They're the fast guy, the ones that jumped into it and were like, we're in. So I made a group. It's about half of my staff.
Wow.
However, we're kind of reaching a point where we all need to go up a step. You know what I mean? Including the people on the bottom, they need to come up a step. And that requires us to put more tension on that rope. And that tension is uncomfortable because it's a challenge. So what I've challenged my guys to think about is like, okay, maybe it's time that we look at a structured way of doing mentorship where we have, basically 3 things. You have that they need to teach, or they need to appreciate, show appreciate, be the cheerleader, show them the why, and then also work with them on how to find improvements, how to see improvements. We talked about some people they're not seeing it yet. well, how do they learn to see? I talked about leaving some low-hanging fruit still so that they could find something, because you're not going to immediately go to like this major process improvement. You're going to say like, oh, this cord, I keep tripping on this cord, so I'm going to, get a zip tie and put it up. Boom, you're starting to see it. So it's like trying to figure that out. But we have talked about like, okay, what do we need to do as a team? And that might end up actually being like, you're going to get assigned a lean all-star, and every day those lean all-stars are going to check in on you. This goes back to like leader standard work. It becomes part of their job duty to go and work with them either half an hour a day, an hour a day, whatever it may be, in their workspace to try to get them to move forward. So I think that's the path that we kind of have forward for that. And then I think once they start to see lean and they start to see how standards matter and work, it becomes like a no-brainer. I talked about this with Patrick Adams in our shipping department, our packaging step. You can tell if they don't follow the SOP because the boxes are different. So you look at the shelf, you see this box is this big, this box is this big. Well, wait a minute. Two things. This is a defect because it's the wrong part in the wrong box, or they didn't follow standard work.
Yeah. In which case, it's still a defect because you use too much packaging. Yeah.
And we have Ben Flick. He does most of our shipping part of that side. He is starting to notice this and going, hold up, this looks like a problem to me. So then he's bringing it to the packaging department and say, hey, guys, we need to open these up. And they're like, why? Well, they're different. So then we open them up, make sure they're the same product, repack the one that's wrong. But they're starting to see the value of that. So it's like, how do I translate that downstream to where they start to see the value of that standard work? And, a lot of times you don't want to like force standard work on people. It's not like you're like facing the standard work towards them and you, and then you're just like, hey, nope, 2 steps to the right, not 3. Don't take 3 steps again. Like that level, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you make sure that they're following some of it or understanding why they should follow it? Why does it matter? That's definitely something we need to work on. We always can. That's something everybody can work on.
Well, and you've spoke a little in your vision for the company, right? As it grows, you want to grow your people. Well, and if that's the reality of it, if you want to be a leader in this company, or we're planning to grow the company, and I want you to be a leader in the company, these are the things that you need to do to be a leader in the company. If it's very, there's a lot of respect for people built in there when you talk about professional development. If it's transparent, like what do I need to be successful here? Yeah. As a individual contributor, or as a lean all-star, or as a manager, that's just there's courtesy in that, but there's also being respectful. Like doesn't always mean being nice. Right? Sometimes it is like this is the hard truth. This is where we need to see you develop to be part of the future of all the companies. I don't know what the holding company is called.
Yeah. So when we talked about this as well. One of the things we talked about were the tools. Like we talked about, everybody fills up their camera roll full of, let's Kanban this and this bin that and that. And I was telling you that I heard somebody say that they would argue that there are no lean tools. They're just lean people that are using strategies. And that I think comes back to that training, right? Yeah. If we spend as much time on our people as we spend on creating tools and implementing tools, then the tools will come. And I think that's a miss. I think, some people, even the best ones, if I had to rank us, I would say we might be 60% tools, 40% people. Where I think we should probably be 60% invested in the people and 40% invested into the actual structure or tools. Now, a Kanban board that collects all your Kanbans is necessary for that process. But if you're still not pulling the Kanban card regularly, the process isn't fixed.
Yeah, but I think you've done a good job of connecting the tool to the purpose here, right? Just to give as an example, there's a client that I'm working with currently, and in their site, we're running a number of projects, and we actually don't introduce any of the tools until we started with problem. Like, let's first find out what the problem is, and then as we get into discovering what the problem is, then we're real time, like introducing short trainings and workshops to like, oh, so you found out that that's a problem that you're running out of parts here. Here's a concept, a principle that could help, and we'll use something like Kanban to signal it. And then they're like, oh, that does help me solve my problem, which any standard or any tool should really be solving a problem, or else why are we making a change at all?
One of the things I talked about with Patrick and one of the challenges he gave me was with leader standard work. I was like, I'm going to build this thing where I have my 3 Kamishi. I'm going to build a Kamishi board for the 3 tasks that I want to make sure I'm doing every day. Like the rocks, right? The things that are important. And then he was like, you need to put it outside your office door. I was like, we're going to put them on everybody's desk. And so like everybody like I've talked to, they're like, I want one. And so we're just going to identify those 3 things that are important. And, for me, coaching is one. And I need to spend more time coaching with it. It doesn't matter who. I can walk out into this business anywhere I want, stop and focus on coaching that person. And that's something that not everybody has the ability to do. But if we all start thinking about that and make it a priority and we coach these people, then we don't have the problem where you have the bottom 10% that says, I don't want to do this. Why are we doing this? I think my biggest fear, though, is if people do get run out of here or they leave because they can't deal with it, that they'll regret leaving when they get somewhere back to a traditional business. Could you imagine being here, like in a lean business like this for 7 months? You know, you have a leader that cares. You have, everything is like rah rah. You know what I mean? You're getting appreciation messages in your, WhatsApp, and then you go to a regular business again. Oh my gosh, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, it does. And I've got a little bit of experience in corporate for several years before I was doing consulting. So like 15, 16 years as a corporate employee. And I've seen leadership on both sides, right? And it's just like, yeah, you don't know what you got until it's not there anymore, until it's gone.
Yeah.
And I have some friends that grew up in lean businesses as well, right? And they say, I didn't know all this was lean till I left and found out other companies don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I think that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. But I tell you, I really appreciate your book. This is a great read. If you haven't got into it, grab this book. It's cheap. It's easy. I mean, it was like $14 on Amazon or anything, or something like that. You're not even ripping people off for it.
And you can go. I got a website. You can go there and download the first chapter for free. Just take it for a test run. So.
I'm gonna put a challenge on you on this.
Okay.
As a member of the lean community that we all learned to read as we got older, why don't you have this in audio?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually having conversations about that now with my publishing strategist, Corey Kirby, who helped me put that out. He's like, when are we working on audio? And I'm like, maybe the second half of the year. I just got to get a little bit of bandwidth. But yeah, it's a good challenge. Thank you.
I think if you get it into audio form, so many more people will consume it. It's hard because when you
I'm writing it down. Okay,
Yeah.
so I use quarterly plans. So I'm going to make that a Q3 rock.
And
is audio book.
I have this lovely studio that's only 5 miles away from your house, and you're more than welcome to come here and set up a teleprompter. And you can do the audio. Don't cheap out. It needs to be your voice.
Oh yeah, that was the plan.
Yeah.
Even though I don't know, at this point I've gotten used to the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, we all think our voice sounds terrible. When we started this podcast, I was like, my voice sucks. This is going to be terrible. And then we got real good audio and we listened to it, and I was like, oh, that's not that bad actually. So I think it's good. But I think you definitely want to do this in audio for people, and you want to do it in your voice. So I'm going to throw that out there as your challenge, and anything I can do to help you with that would be great.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again for coming by. Yeah. You're welcome anytime.
I appreciate the tour, and I'm really excited. You said it's summertime frame.
Yeah,
You're planning to move into, so can't wait to come see the new setup, because I think there's some opportunity here for some of your material flow. So I can't wait to see it. Yeah,
I think what we need to do is we need to start scheduling regular lunch times together, because I think
do it.
Iron can sharpen iron. I can show you my building. We can grab a Butterburger from Culver's.
Yeah,
like the classic Midwest day.
And I do have 2 clients I'm already thinking about that you said you'd love to bring people in and share the knowledge. I'd love them to see what this can actually look like in application, especially the Kanban versus the MRP.
Oh, MRP.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But anyways, thank you so much for coming on, and thanks for stopping by. And it was a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, thanks, man.
I'm sure I'll see you around soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, thanks.